And just like that, it is time to set your music class back up for the new school year. Whether you're watching this way in advance so that you can just, you know, get your mind right, or you're watching this right on time for school to start because you're setting up your room already, we're gonna talk about some things that you want to consider in your elementary music room, as well as some tips, tricks, and just all the things that I have learned from 7 years of setting up my classroom. This year being at a whole new school, so I had a whole new perspective this year. So we'll get into it. And also, just FYI, I'm gonna leave down below in the description links to classroom setup videos and like classroom tours and stuff like that. So if you're looking for more stuff along this line, you can click the link down below to join those. And if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe, because we like it when music teachers subscribe so you can get more music content. So let's get into it. All right, so the first thing that you want to do when you are going to set up a classroom is to make sure you have the right stuff. So there's a couple of things that I always place an order for online before I get to my classroom. When we're about a week ahead, I'll go on Amazon and I will buy these 3 things every single year. And those things are, number 1, hot glue sticks, because I go through these like a crazy person. Number 2 is command strips and command hooks. So these are those like sticky things you hang on the wall. I think pretty much everyone knows what command strips and hooks are at this point. But these I use all around my classroom constantly so that I can hang things up. Number 3 is laminating sheets. I do have my school has a laminator, but I also have a personal laminator, and I find it's just really helpful to have a laminator in your room and have those laminating sheets ready to go. In addition to those 3 things that I purchase every year, there's a couple of things that I use every year that are like things that you don't have to repurchase. But oh, look at that, got 3 of those too. So these 3 things are really helpful. Number 1 is, again, a hot glue gun for those hot glue sticks. So hot glue gun is dire. And let me tell you, the best decision I ever made was buying a Ryobi hot glue gun. I will insert a video here so you can see how beautiful it is. But basically, this is a rechargeable glue gun, and it is serious. Like, y'all, I use the same battery in my hot glue gun as I use in my miter saw when I'm like redoing the dining room. Like, I mean, it is serious. It's like a power tool brand, but you use the rechargeable batteries and it gets super hot, and it is fabulous because you can use this hot glue gun all over your room, and it's wireless and it is magical. I know there are cheaper wireless options, but usually they suck. And so I would highly recommend that if you have some like money available to you, that you grab one of these. Highly recommend. I will link it down below. If you obviously don't have the money, because it is not a cheap item, this one and the next one are not super cheap. If you don't have the money, like, totally fine, put it on your Christmas list. Like, you need it. Number 2 is also not cheap. Again, put it on your Christmas list if you can't get it now. But number 2, something I use all the time when I'm setting up my classroom, is my laminator. Again, my school has a laminator, but sometimes you gotta like wait in line for the laminator. Sometimes it runs out of lamination film. Sometimes it just doesn't work or whatever. So there's just a lot of times where I found it is so helpful to have my own laminator, especially when it's like last minute. I'm like, oh, I need to just do this 1 page. Like, I don't want to walk all the way to the media center just to do 1 page of lamination. Like, really? And then have to wait to get it back? Like, no. So I really like having my own laminator. I will link my laminator down below, but I will also link a second version because mine actually was a gift for Christmas from my mother-in-law, because she was also a teacher, so like she understands. But I will link a cheaper option down below as well. I love mine because it's really big, but you know, there we go. The third thing, which is cheaper, is a paper cutter. A paper cutter is just what it sounds like. It's, you know, one of those things that cuts paper. You can get the slidey ones, but this year I got the overhead ones, and yeah, I think they're called a guillotine, which is kind of not great. But let me tell you, it is life-changing. I love it so much. I bought one for the house. They are amazing because they cut so much faster and they can cut so much more. And the slidey ones, sometimes the little blade like gets lost, and that's not good when you have children in the room. Okay. So now that we have talked about the things that you need to have to set up your classroom, let's talk about your plan. So next up, you need to have a plan for your classroom. Where are you gonna put things? When you're looking at this, I really want you to think about where the kids are going to be. So where are they sitting? Think like what different activities you need for them to do. So for example, we don't sit in chairs in my room because sometimes we're sitting and listening, but sometimes we're getting into circle. Sometimes we're playing a game. Sometimes we're using the whole room. So for me, having that empty space is the most important thing. So we don't sit in chairs. You may or may not be the same. That's okay. Then we also need space to have centers. So where would we have centers? Where are we gonna sit when we're listening? Those are all things you wanna think about, is where the kids are gonna be and where they might need to move to. You also wanna think about your areas. So I have my desk area where I like do my work. And then I have my like teaching area, which is more like the piano. I usually have a music stand up there so I can put just things that I'm using like in the moment, and I keep a little box that has like all my stuff that I use a lot in it. And all of these are at the front of the room because they need to be easily accessible. So think about where the kids are and what they're gonna need, and think about where you're going to be and what you need in order to be successful in teaching. And the other thing you need to plan for is storage. So storage can be a huge thing. But the biggest thing I want you to think of when it comes to storage is what needs to be accessible by the children and what should not be accessible by the children. The rule of thumb is if it is visible, somebody is going to mess with it. Now, depending on your classroom management, depending on your school, you're gonna have varying degrees of this problem, but someone's gonna mess with it. At my previous school, it was so bad that I put pretty much everything that we weren't currently using in the closet because I needed those hands off, and we had a lot of really fun friends who didn't like to listen to anything. And so we, you know, if it was away, that was the only way to really keep things safe. My new school, I don't have that problem as much. I have like 1 or 2 students who are extra fun and who just can't help themselves, and so those are really the only ones I'm concerned about. But if it is in the open, it will get touched, so just be aware of that. If you don't want something to be touched, make sure it is not easily accessible. So pushed up against a wall, maybe even covered with some fabric, or in a closet or something. I use my piano. I'll kind of put it in a corner, and then you can store stuff behind your piano. And that's not totally like away, but it gives it kind of that like enclosed area that kids usually understand, like, oh, I don't go back there for the most part. So just be aware of those things. And then also think about things like that kids do need to be accessible. So like, for example, my clipboards are always at the front of the room because we need to be able to use those often. And all of these things that they use a lot, I like to label where they go so that students can easily find the crayons and the clipboards and the pencils and know where those things are so that they're able to use them, as well as anything that we're using right now. So like the instruments that we use a lot, I keep lower down so that they can pull them off the shelves, versus things that I don't use as much, I put higher up, or I don't want them to touch necessarily, I put higher up so that they are discouraged from touching them. So think about those things. Along with storage, you also want to think about storage containers. So if you, by the way, if you have like zero budget, my first classroom, the first thing I did was I took a bunch of paper boxes and I covered them with fabric, and I used those to store a lot of my items. And that was a really cheap way that I was able to do that. And then I've upgraded since then. Like last year, I bought a lot of containers because I, you know, I'm not a first year teacher anymore. And so I was able to do that, and it was really helpful. But you don't have to spend money. Like there's gonna be something there that you can use. So think about containers, think about areas, think about height, all of that kind of stuff. Now you're also gonna need to hang things up. So whether that is posters or student work, there's gonna need to be things on the walls, and that's always a thing. Let's talk about hanging things up for a second. First of all, if you have bulletin boards, use them. Great. Problem solved. If you don't have bulletin boards though, there's a couple different things you can do. First of all, you can just hang things on the wall themselves. So you can just kind of make like areas of like, this is, you know, the area where we have rhythm stuff, and this is the area where we have instrument stuff. Or you can also do some other things. So you can make your own boards. I actually have some foam boards that my mom made me in high school for my class, my room, that I have then brought to my classrooms ever since. And they're just pieces of foam that she got from like Home Depot. and covered with fabric and hot glued to the back. And these work as little DIY bulletin boards, and you can hang them up. Mine have ribbons that I hot glued to them, and I just hang them on command hooks, or you can hang them on nails or anything like that. But that's a really easy way to make your own poster boards. You could also use poster board or even like foam board. I've done that quite a bit, where I put everything onto a poster board or onto a foam board and then put that on the wall with command strips or with hot glue, and then leave that up for the year. And that's a good way to kind of contain things. You could also put up clipboards. So take clipboards and put them, like command hook them to the wall. And that's a really good way to have something that you can easily switch out, because you can change things. You can pull them off and put them back on and all that good stuff. That'd be really great for like student work, and you could have, you know, however many you want, just as many clipboards as you got. There you go. And somebody probably has clipboards that they don't want, that they can donate to you. Now, how do you actually get things to stay on the wall? First of all, you can use tape, obviously. Depending on what walls you have, that may or may not work. Painter's tape or masking tape typically works for my drywall, but my cinder block walls, not so much. So what I use on those is typically command strips are great. I will rave about command strips all the time. That's why I tell you I always buy them. I also do pretty well with hot glue. If you're on cinder blocks, hot glue is the best way to put things on the wall. I've also seen people like, they put up painter's tape and then they hot glue on the painter's tape and then put things on there. I haven't tried that. I just hot glue it straight to the wall. It doesn't usually mess up the paint. It has once or twice, but usually it does pretty well as far as not messing things up. You could also use clothespins. So I use this a lot, especially for hanging things. I have like a hanging banner in my room. And so I have clothespins that I have hot glued to the wall, and I just hook it into the clothespins and hang it that way. You could also do that with hooks as well. So you can hook things to the wall, just put up a command hook and, you know, go to town. I would, by the way, check with other people in your building and see what they do, because that's gonna be your best option to figure out what's gonna work in your room is what works in other people's room. So talk to the other people in your building and see what works for them the best. All right, there's two more things we're gonna talk about when it comes to classroom setup and how you need to think about it and what you need to look at. The next one is, where are the kids gonna sit? So this is probably the biggest thing you need to figure out, is where they're gonna sit, how they're gonna sit, and all those things. I would highly recommend that you have a assigned seat with a seating chart, because this is gonna help you learn the kids' names. It helps keep classroom management situated because they're not sitting by their friends running their mouths. And it also helps the kids because they really like having their own spot. I mean, think about it. If you go and have a team meeting, or if you go to family dinner, like every family has like their assigned chairs, but they're not actually assigned. Like, you're not assigned that chair. Just like you sit there and then you never move. You sit there for the whole rest of the year. So the kids like having that consistency of like, this is my spot, and it really helps fight the chaos if they have a particular spot. So definitely love that. There's a couple different ways that you can have your seating chart. I'm not going to talk about, like, obviously you can have rows, you can have like a horseshoe shape, you can have a circle, all those different things. I will say though, personally, I don't love a circle for instruction time. I like a circle for games and for singing, but I don't love a circle for instruction time. And the reason is because if you're trying to talk and the kids are looking at each other, they're gonna get off task. So when we're doing like our mini lessons, where Miss Davis is talking and we're listening section, I always have them in rows, because that way they're facing me and their focus is where it needs to be. If you're having them face each other, they're never gonna focus on you, because that's not where their focus is. I mean, literally, like, they're not focused because that's not where they're looking. So that's just my 2 cents, but you know, you can do whatever you want. So let's talk about where you can do those assigned seats. First of all, if you have a rug, use it. I used to have the most wonderful rug. It had dots all over it, and you had your own dot, and it was great. And my new school does not have a rug, and that was sad. I also know other rugs have squares and different things, and you can use your rug for that. Or you could even put tape on your rug to have, like, you know, this is where you sit on the tape. But rugs are great if you have a rug. I moved schools and I did not have a rug this year, so I decided to get sit spots. So sit spots are like little Velcro dots that stick to the carpet. And I would, by the way, I did a lot of research and everyone said get the name brand and not the Amazon brand because they hold up better. And the kids sit on these all year long. We have done this all year long and I've only had 2 that really have like gotten broken, so I feel like that's a pretty good ratio for about 30. I'm filming this, we have like 2 weeks of school left, so pretty much at the end of the year. But yeah, so I got mine off of Amazon. They have a couple different color sets. Mine are the brights. I did not get the brights with the numbers on them because people told me that the numbers and colors were random and I wanted rose. So I got the brights and then I put numbers on them with my Cricut. I'll link a video for how I did that down below. You could also just write numbers, that'd be fine too. And I used that to make my rows. So I have like 1 through 5 sit on green in the front, and then 6 through 10 are on blue next. And that way I can say the green row, do this, the blue row, do this. And it helps me to organize my life a lot better. And so I like having that situation. So they've done pretty well with not messing with them, but I do make a really big deal about you do not touch the dots. Now, sit spots are only going to work if you have carpet, so if you don't have carpet, do keep that in mind. Next up, you can make lines out of tape or out of Velcro tape, depending on what your situation is, and you can have lines down on the floor and students can sit on the line, so you sit on the red line or the green line or different things like that. I would color coordinate them because that would be great, unless you made it look like a treble clef. That would be cool. If you do, I want to see pictures. Next up, if you have chairs, you can have the kids sit on chairs, obviously. Or if you have risers, I've been in a lot of music classrooms where they sat on risers. That's cool too. Just obviously you're gonna have to really make a big deal about how we sit in chairs or on risers so that we don't have any problems. And finally, is what I'm calling the grid system. I saw a teacher in my district, I did like an observation my first year teaching, and she did this and it blew my mind because she was at not the most well-behaved school, and her kids were so well-behaved because her classroom management was like amazing. Secondly, she didn't have anything on the floor for them to reference. She had grids. She literally had thumbtacks on the walls. So your line was in line with like the first thumbtack or the second thumbtack or the third thumbtack. And your grid was, all right, first thumbtack this way, and then I'm in front of the flag this way, or first thumbtack this way and I'm in front of the right side of the board, or whatever. And so they would make a grid where it was like that intersection is where you sit. And she said she would go through the first day and help them all find like their grid space, and then after that, like they all just got it and like they all knew where to sit. And I was like, there is nothing on the floor. Personally, I'm not adventurous enough for that. I just like being like, go sit on number 3. But it was really impressive, and you might try that if one of the other options is not an option for you. The last thing I want you to consider as you're setting up your classroom is where the students are going to line up, and specifically if they need any references. I got to my new school this year and I did not think about this. I was just like, oh, we line up, you know, in front of the door. And y'all, these lines would be like wobbly. And I was like, heck no, we're not doing this. So I ended up getting a second set of sit spots, and I got the black ones that have the numbers in white. And this has been great. And so I put the sit spots down, and you stand on the sit spots when we get in line for the line. So this keeps it really straight. It keeps them spaced out nicely because they're not all clumped up because they're, you know, on their numbers. And then they stand on the same number that they sat on. So if I sat on 3, I'm now standing on number 3, and that is really helpful to help them know where to stand and make sure that we're not getting out of line and moving around and doing all of that kind of stuff. It also helps if we don't get in line from our dots to the lineup dots. Like today we were doing like a color by note activity, so I just had them put their things up and then get in line, and they would put their things up and then get in line on their number. So if they were number 7, it didn't matter if they were the first one over there, they went and got a number 7. It alleviates a lot of arguments. It's really great. Highly recommend. So I will leave a link to sit spots down below, as well as the other things I talked about in this video, and also some other like, you know, classroom setup kind of videos that you can check out down below. If you are interested in that stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe, because this year I will have a classroom tour, and I will try to do that in the fall and not in May like I did this year. So we've got that going for us. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. if you hit the subscribe button, of course. Anyway,